Hey, want to take a walk on the wild side and experience the bleeding edge of technology? Then get ready, because it doesn't get much more edgy than this. You're in for a wild ride. You're listening to Sovryn Tech with your host, the man in triple black, the golden stallion of the tech world, Brian Sovryn. He's got a huge brain. And now, here's Brian.
Oh, yes. Just got back from a little book burning party. After a fashion. Yes, I was burning some holy books, the Book of Mormon, the Catholic Catechism, and also a 1611 edition of the King James Bible. Oh, yeah. Also had some good friends across the country burning the Kybalion, the Book of Thoth, or the Emerald Tablet of Thoth, I should say. It was quite the time. And of course, you know, aren't you worried the Earth's going to swallow you whole? It's like, well, if only it would. I'd like to see it try. Oh boy, late night recording. Anyway, yeah, a little book burning, little Ozzy Osbourne, always a good time, right, Mr. Crowley? Let's get right into the rapid fire stories. We've got a whole lot to talk about this week. Really exciting episode. Before I touch on the rapid fire stories, though, boy, talk about exciting episode. The special that came out this week, it's special 210021, Made Safe, where I had David Irvin on, and David Irvin is an absolute class act from Scotland, and Made Safe is probably the most exciting project I've heard of, maybe ever. I mean, this is amazing what it's going to do for the internet, for communication, for setting knowledge free, just so much. And it's been in development for like 8 years, since like 2006. So, you know, this isn't some Bitcoin knockoff. In fact, I mean, they're only comparable, maybe, you know, very slightly. This is far out stuff. And it's so exciting to hear about these technologies like Meowbit, you know, with NAMECOIN. And you know, now we have Made Safe, all these just amazing things coming out. So if you haven't listened to it yet, please go give that a listen. It is one of the most, for me, it's probably the most exciting interview I've ever done. I mean, I was blown away by the info that was getting laid down and by David Irvin's attitude and outlook on things. Just fantastic. So, and, you know, speaking of mentioning things, I'm really excited about this. Sovryn Tech is getting mentioned on other podcasts. I love it. It's happened once before. It's happening again. It got talked about on Blog Linux. This is a French Canadian, podcast. You can go to, Blog Linux, you know, BLOGLINUX.ca. That'll take you to their website and you can check it out. And I am honored because I've looked at the other, the other podcasts that they've recommend, you know, people check out or that they've listed. And it includes, you know, who's who, Hack5, a lot of the stuff on the Twit network. I mean, really to be considered part of that class, you know, in that class of great podcasters, I am so honored. And the show's in French. Okay. So I wish I knew French. It is the language I want to know because there's so much stuff going on in the French, language speaking world that is so ahead of the English speaking world, in my opinion. I really wish I knew it. So, but I'm really honored. It's a show with Foss, you know, it's about open source. Which is great because that's one of the things that's happening. It's one of the reasons I'm so glad to do a tech show is because these worlds, you know, the open source world, the hacker community and the liberty community are literally coming together. They're not colliding. They are coming together in cooperation. And it is so exciting. And I am more than happy to get talked about, you know, on a show that's maybe not necessarily liberty minded, but, you know, is just open source. But then you find out they're kind of one and the same. So cool. So I want you to check it out. I know I've got a lot of listeners. I do have listeners in France. I know that. And I know I have a lot of listeners in Canada that probably speak French. And if you have not heard of Blog Linux, please go, check it out. I'll put a link in the show notes, in the appendix of the show notes, so that you can go give it a listen, and you let them know I sent you. So anyway, all right, rapid fire stories. Let's get right to it. You can now, this is exciting for me, the best music service, at least in the United States, though its availability is growing in other countries, the best music service out there is Google Play Music All Access. Hands down. It's just, it blows everything else away because, it has the same 7 million songs or however many million songs that every other music service has. But it gives you that 20,000 songs that you can upload for yourself, so that those 7 million songs, if they're missing things, and boy, are they missing things, though that the collection is growing. Try getting half of Def Leppard's catalog. You can't. Like the re-release of Slang that came out recently, one of my favorite Def Leppard albums from '96, first album I ever actually bought by them on release day. That's available, but try finding like the entire album of Hysteria. Now there's a copyright issue as to why all that is, but that's my point, is that if you already owned it, like I do, you can just upload it and then it enhances your library. Google Play Music All Access is the only one that does that, but there's been kind of a flaw in that, like, let's say you were part of the whole Google universe, and you're using a Chromebook. I use a Chromebook. I love Chromebooks. You couldn't upload any music to it. You could only upload the music if you had, a Linux machine, an OS X machine, or a Windows machine. Not true anymore. You can actually upload songs from the web browser. They just added this ability into the Google Music Labs section of Google Play. And that's so good. That's why I can deal with Chromebooks. That's why I can deal with only a 16 gig hard drive, because the bulk of what takes up hard drive space for me on any computer was always my music collection, because I didn't I wouldn't go anywhere without it. But now, I can put it up in the cloud and it's accessible. And so, a Chromebook can play the music very, very well. And this ability just makes it all the easier. It's going to get to the point, I think, really, if I could produce my podcasts on a Chromebook, which there's some web options for it, but I don't really like them. But if I could, natively do that, I'd probably end up just using a Chromebook all the time. What the hell? So super secure, just really, really secure stuff. So anyway, I thought that was a nice addition. I was glad to hear about it now. And this makes it easy too, because now you don't have to install the Google Play Music software on another computer, which I had a BSD machine where it was a little tough to do. Now it can just be done in the browser, no problem, and away you go. And I think it can do it in Firefox, actually. So, you don't even need Chrome for that. So the great addition. Anyway, let's see. IRS, this is kind of the big news this week, and maybe this has to do with the dip. It's under 500 right now. Bitcoin, the value of Bitcoin is under 500 USD on the average. They are claiming that Bitcoin is property and not currency. And of course, real quick, I'm not going to go, there's plenty of shows that are talking about this. Free Talk Live talked about it. I'm sure Let's Talk Bitcoin is going to talk about it. All kinds of shows are going to talk about it. So the only thing I'm going to say is this, and this is similar to a lot of other people are saying, is just there's no way they can enforce this. I don't know what they're trying to do. I don't know who exactly they're trying to. The only thing I could figure is they're making it this way to work against who are those, the Winklevoss twins or whoever, some of the big holders that they know. I get the feeling that calling it property is to work against exchanges and to work against all these companies. I don't think it has anything to do with working against individuals and with the stuff getting taxed. I think calling it property is so that it falls under various laws that allows them to control the companies that provide services with Bitcoin, whatever those may be. So that's just my opinion. I don't know if anyone else has said that. But yeah, I don't think they can enforce it. Certainly not on a mass level, a mass adoption level, but calling it property how it is, they could certainly, enforce it against companies. And so that's what I really think. That's why they decided to do that. Not to give you a hard time with your taxes. I think it has to do with ways that they can legislate against Bitcoin service companies. Maybe like Overstock or whatever does Coinbase, you name it, or even the ones up and coming. I think that's what that's all about. So I wouldn't be too worried about it. I don't think it has anything to do with the individual person. Because they can't track it. There's no way. You know what I mean? You can't. There's no way you can enforce it. They don't have the manpower or even the computer ability to do it. The software ability to track it all. Let's see what else we have. Turkey, boy, crazy stuff going on in Turkey. I think some people wanted me to kind of, talk about it quite a bit on the show. I think we need to see how it plays out and then talk about it from there. But essentially Turkey, it's laughable because Turkey is, this is another thing, like trying to, collect taxes from people on Bitcoin. Totally laughable effort by the government. Well, here's another laughable effort by a government, in another part of the world, that being Turkey. They've banned Twitter and now they've banned Google's DNS. Okay. So essentially, you can't, because what they were doing is to get on Twitter. It's an election season right now, and they're trying to shut all this stuff down. And so they were keeping people from getting on Twitter because they didn't want another, revolution. They didn't want people saying, talking smack about the politicians that are there because they're all slime and the people there know it. And so they were rerouting into Twitter through Google's DNS, and they were spray painting, on buildings and bridges in Turkey, how to get around the whole thing. And it's ridiculous because they're figuring out ways around it. Even though they blocked Google's DNS, the Turkish people are just circumventing everything. People are spreading copies of Tor. They tried blocking the Tor project's website, and they did, but doesn't matter if you already downloaded Tor. Too late. You can use Tor and you go online, no problem. So, again, both two great stories during Rapid Fire Stories are just showing how laughable the attempts by governments to control the people are. They're dinosaurs. They're falling away. We'll probably talk about that a little bit more in a minute. The last bit, I love this. This is great. Mardi Gras, I believe, was last week. And at the Mardi Gras, one of the big problems, and this goes for a lot of things, so I could see this as a real market opportunity. One of the big problems is finding a bathroom, particularly a nice bathroom, right? And so someone had the genius at Mardi Gras to do essentially an Airbnb for bathrooms at Mardi Gras. And this is so cool because the company, they're called AirPnP. I thought that was a class act. It's so good. So AirPnP, and this is going to start getting used at other venues as well. So exciting what the market can come up with, right? We can get bathrooms, rented out and privatized and whatever else. I think it's great. So anyway, let's get into our lead story. It's a pretty quick story. So we've been talking about all kinds of things, but this is interesting. This is something that is really, really popular right now. So it's a good subject to talk about. And it's these quizzes. Have you seen these quizzes? I'm sure you have. On social media, people take these quizzes and it's like, oh, I took this quiz and it says that I'm Darth Vader, or I'm Bilbo Baggins from Lord of the Rings, or, I'm this person because of my personality type or whatever. Well, apparently, and these are usually totally free, but apparently there may be some degree of nefariousness, if that's a word, behind it all. So let's see. This is from marketplace.org. And it's quizzes are free data mining tools for brands. If you're on Facebook, you may have noticed a lot of quizzes lately. Which state should you live in? What kind of dog are you? Which U.S. president are you? How would you die in Game of Thrones? I took all of these quizzes, and for the record, if I were a state, I'd be Ohio. If I were a dog, I'd be a Labrador. If I were a president, I'd be Ulysses S. Grant. If I were in Game of Thrones, I would be decapitated. Why am I posting all this on Facebook? It's a way to announce something about ourselves to our friends within our social network, but it's not quite so gauche or obvious to come off as narcissistic, says Michael Scrazio, assistant professor in the Department of Communication at Fairfield University. You see, the reason I would be decapitated in Game of Thrones is that I'm well-intentioned and loyal to a fault. I want people to know this about me, so I share it, and then I want to hear more good things about myself, so I take another quiz. We've been making quizzes for a long time, but we've recently seen them take off, says Summer Ann Barton, managing editorial director at BuzzFeed, which is behind many of the most popular online quizzes. Now that we've sold some companies on the idea of quizzes, we're now looking at how to use the things that we've learned for companies' benefits, or for a company's benefit. So they can have their own shareable pieces of content that go viral and that are really associated with their brand. BuzzFeed recently teamed up with HBO on the How Would You Die in Game of Thrones quiz. It got over 1 million hits. It's a very effective ad for Game of Thrones and, as it turns out, a very effective data mining tool. It's a tool for advertisers to understand us better, masquerading as a tool for us to understand ourselves better, says Aram Senarich, a media professor at Rutgers University. As Senarich explains, not only does HBO now know I watch Game of Thrones and taking the quiz, I gave them a lot of information. My preferred alcohol, white wine, my last meal, a steak, my biggest fear, failure, my idea of heaven, a tropical beach. That is hugely valuable information. That's the brilliance of this plan, says Senarich. Instead of us reluctantly agreeing to give marketers information about ourselves, we are emphatically proclaiming to marketers who we are and then demanding that our friends do the same. Senarich said, the quiz fad will probably fade, but the economic need for marketers to get more information on us will not. He expects we'll see more tools that will make handing over information about ourselves into a game. Okay, so clearly the gamification of everything. I mean, I took a couple of these quizzes. They're generally bullshit. Bullshit in that, like, the answers that come out, like, I ended up being Darth Vader in the Star Wars quiz. And I'm like, why am I Darth Vader? Like, that doesn't even make sense. And the quizzes are nonsense in themselves. I mean, I guess they're kind of fun, but like the options are so limited. Like, I don't know how I ended up as Darth Vader because I chose every non-violent answer I possibly could. But of course, there isn't actually like, there isn't questions for, or, there isn't options for, you toss your lightsaber like Luke Skywalker did in ROTJ, my favorite moment in Star Wars. None of that stuff kind of exists. So this stuff really can't tell you anything about yourself in the first place. It's kind of just a fun little game, I think. And maybe it appeals to your child, I don't want to say your inner child, but your child self, your child part that essentially, is looking for like confirmation. Yeah, that's my hero, stuff like that. I don't begrudge anybody for doing these things. Again, yes, they're bullshit. Okay. But I mean, there's plenty of ways to pass the time, and why not do that? It's pretty interesting. So, and I mean, obviously they're very banal. Yes, I know that word's supposed to be banal, but they're very banal in like even their explorations of the characters. It's all just so basic. But the interesting thing is that what it shows to me, and like I've mentioned, the gamification of everything. If you turn something into somewhat of a game, I mean, people will just do it. I wonder, and I don't think it's unfair for people to ask this question is, how much is the NSA behind some of these quizzes now? And BuzzFeed in particular, I mean, that's an open-ended question as far as, how involved is the NSA? I mean, it's a great way to find out all kinds of things about people. Of course, people can a lot of times what happens is that people will take the test multiple times until they can come up with the person that they actually want. So what actual great information are they getting? How accurate is it? Probably not a whole lot of accurate, frankly. So, they got to make it to where maybe people have set accounts. That way they can really attach it to you per se. But BuzzFeed in particular is a news aggregator that is coming up with the most clever ways, and I praise them and condemn them at the same time in saying this. They come up with the most clever ways to hook people, to click links and to get them, to go to ads. But that's really kind of the problem, is that the trick becomes the purpose of BuzzFeed and other sites of its ilk becomes, how do we get people to just go to our websites, so that they can see the ads? Because what they do in turn is they say, okay, we got, 10 million clicks. And so you should advertise on our website. That's what they say to whatever company they're pitching to advertise. Okay. And so I think there's a real problem there in that, the incentive doesn't become, let's deliver great news or a great story, or let's do actually like really interesting kind of, psychological games or whatever you want to call these quizzes. But it becomes, okay, how do we hook people to just click how do we get as many clicks as we possibly can? And that's really unfortunate. That's really pathetic. I get it that advertising is a way that, that you stay afloat, that a business exists. I totally understand. I'm an ad exec. I get it. I work for Free Talk Live and I have to get ads for our show. And, when you try and, especially when your show in particular, like this is the thing, BuzzFeed is not taking any kind of strong stances or whatever. They just want you to click. They just want to make money. They don't care about the news. Okay. It's where you take something like Free Talk Live, where, when they say that, members of the military are trained killers, etc. We have a hard time getting advertisers because of that. That's a fact. Okay. So that's what kind of annoys me, is that these people aren't taking strong stances. Their incentives are not to actually like spread information like some other companies do, or other aggregators like Free Talk Live or whoever else. Their incentive is just to get clicks, and they don't even care. I don't think that they don't even care about whether or not, the advertisers that they get, whether or not that they're going to get a good deal out of it. I care about my clients when I'm selling ads. Okay. When I'm pitching to somebody, hey, do you want to advertise on our show? I care about that company. I want them to get something out of it. I want it to be a mutual beneficial relationship. And I don't feel like a lot of these people do. And so there's just this cheapness, and I agree. It's a fad. It's going to go away. I think a lot of people are seeing just how cheap it is. And I kind of, how cheap it is in that, like, there's not a personal touch. There's not an actual care, even though you answer these questions. I mean, and again, the quizzes are a fail anyway, because like, take the example of white wine. It's like, there's questions where it asks me, what would I drink if I drank? Or, like, would you drink a scotch? Would you drink wine? Would you drink Jim Beam? Whatever. That's rigged. I don't drink. How could I possibly answer that correctly? So it's a mess. It's a fad that's going to go away. There's no harm in anyone taking these things. I don't think anyone's ridiculous for doing it. I've done some of them. I'm already sick of them completely, and just because, like, you can't actually, like, if the reason people are into it is because they get to share something about themselves, A, lot of people are very vapid, but B, there's no personality type apparently that matches mine, because I can't choose answers to these questions, that are meaningful to me. So, like the drinking questions, or like, what weapon would you choose? None. You can't choose none. So, so they're kind of ridiculous. Again, if it's just for fun, whatever, people can do it. That's okay. Not judging. But let's just keep in mind what the real purpose of this is. It's getting clicks on a website to sell ads. It is not really for you to have a good time. It's to kind of just manipulate you to click. So keep perspective of these things. And, a lot of these fake things on the internet are really going to fall away. But, I kind of wonder, so many of these big companies are ruining the internet for people. I wonder if people are going to find the internet to be passé. That's an interesting thought.
Got an energy spike. Pull back! Launch. Now! Bombing the Narn back to the Stone Age wasn't enough for you?
Then we heard it. The sound of something terrible being born.
This is madness. Station 3 to Commander Ivanova.
Centauri have launched a full-scale assault.
Time is coming on! It's our turn now!
2 million tons of spinning metal, all alone in the night. A world where empires rise and fall, where dreams are born and die, where war and hatred are challenged by love and faith. In the third age of mankind, an age plagued by an evil empire that seeks to destroy humanity. It is our last, best hope for peace, for victory, for freedom. It is Babylon 5.
Babylon 5 is available for download on your favorite torrent site. See it now to experience the greatest show in television history. Babylon 5.
Tech Roulette Want to play?
It is time for Tech Roulette, and I always want to play. You know that. Tech Roulette, of course, is where you can email the show and, send stories to the show. You can email sovereigntech@riseup.net. You can send it through Twitter, Google+, whatever. Send it whatever. There's a lot of options. You go to sovereigntech.com, bottom left side of the screen, you will see links there. You can, one of those links can get you hooked up. Don't worry about that. So before I do get into our Tech Roulette story that was sent in, I do want to just, where we left off in the last segment where I talked about, would the internet become passé? I guess my concern is, of course the internet, the technology is going to continue to get used, but I guess will, the way the internet looks right now be the way that it continues to look 20, 30 years from now? And I understand advertising does a lot of the funding. But if you listen to the MadeSafe special that just came out, MadeSafe is funded by its own coin called SafeCoin. There is actually the Let's Talk Bitcoin network. They're doing what's called LTB coin, where there's going to be this coin that essentially funds the network itself. All this, there's new ways coming out. Okay. And this is something I said that was important. We need to find new ways to fund the internet because ads in and of themselves, especially targeted ads, are antithetical to your privacy. Okay. Just by their design. And so we need to get away from that sort of thing. But it looks like, the answers are coming on how to do that, because like these quizzes, again, no problem if you do them, but admit it, they are bullshit. So this week's Tech Roulette, speaking of personality types, which is a lot of times what those quizzes are supposed to show. This is interesting. This is from a website, themindunleashed.org. And of course it links to other things. I did confirm that what we're about to talk about is real. It seems so ridiculous that you would think it's unreal. And a lot of times you can't trust what's on the internet, but I did my due diligence here and this is legit. So the story is nonconformity and free thinking now considered mental illnesses. Is nonconformity and free thinking a mental illness? According to the newest edition of the DSM-4, the Diagnostic and Statistical Manual of Mental Disorders, is a very popular, manual that pretty much is a list of mental illnesses. It's up to the DSM-5 now, and this is still there. Sometimes illnesses get removed, like MPD, multiple personality disorder, that no longer is true, and disorders like hysteria. Which, boy, if you read into that, they say it's gone, but hysteria, what it is, it's a mental illness for women. Yeah, right. Is still on the books. It just has some different names. Anyway. So it's in the DSM-5 or, the 4 and 5. The manual identifies a new mental illness called Oppositional Defiant Disorder, or ODD. This is the part that makes it so unbelievable. It's odd. That's the acronym is odd. ODD. Oppositional Defiant Disorder. That's why I had a hard time believing it's real, but no, it's totally real. Defined as an ongoing pattern of disobedient, hostile, and defiant behavior. Sometimes symptoms include questioning authority, negativity, defiance, argumentativeness, and being easily annoyed. Boy, who does that sound like? The DSM-4 is the manual used by psychiatrists to diagnose mental illnesses, and with each new edition, there are scores of new mental illnesses. Are we becoming sicker? Is it getting harder to be mentally healthy? Authors of the DSM-4 say that it's because they're better able to identify these illnesses today. Critics charge that it's because they have too much time on their hands. I may be inclined to believe the latter. New mental illnesses identified by the DSM-4 include arrogance, narcissism, above average creativity, cynicism, and antisocial behavior. In the past, these were called personality traits, but now they're diseases, and there are treatments available. All of this is a symptom of our overdiagnosing and over-medicating culture. In the last 50 years, the DSM-4 has gone from 130 to 357 mental illnesses. A majority of these illnesses afflict children. Although the manual is an important diagnostic tool for the psychiatric industry, it has also been responsible for social changes. The rise in ADD, bipolar disorder, and depression in children has been largely because of the manuals identifying certain behaviors as symptoms. A Washington Post article observed that if Mozart were born today, he would be diagnosed with ADD and medicated into barren normality. According to the DSM-4, the diagnosis guidelines for identifying oppositional defiant disorder are for children, but adults can just as easily suffer from the disease. This should give any free-thinking American reason for worry. I could care less about the American title. Should give anybody in the world reason for worry. The Soviet Union used new mental illnesses, quote unquote, for political repression. People who didn't accept the beliefs of the Communist Party developed a new type of schizophrenia. They suffered from the delusion of believing communism was wrong. They were isolated, forcefully medicated, and put through repressive therapy to bring them back to sanity. When the latest edition of the DSM-5 was published, or DSM-4, I'm so used to calling it the DSM-5 because I do actually talk about this manual quite often. Identifying the symptoms of various mental illnesses to children, there was a jump in the diagnosis and medication of children. Some states have laws that allow protective agencies to forcibly medicate and even make it a punishable crime to withhold medication. This paints a chilling picture for those of us who are nonconformists. Although the authors of the manual claim no ulterior motives, but simply better diagnostic practices, the labeling of free-thinking and nonconformity as mental illnesses has a lot of potential for abuse. It can easily become a weapon in the arsenal of a repressive state. So, pretty fascinating, and I agree with, at least in this part, I agree with the writer of the article that it's terrifying, and it's worrisome. That this is real, because I mean, anything that essentially gets, that gets developed for the DSM, whenever new editions get released, instantaneously Glaxo Wellcome and whoever else, whatever other pharmaceutical companies starts developing something to cure whatever that new, disease is. Now there's arguments, and kind of wish the lovely and hyper intelligent Dr. Stephanie Murphy were here, to talk about this. Maybe I can have her on next week when that, I know everybody loves when that happens. But when they use the term disease, they like to kind of like worm around the word, saying, well, we're not really saying disease. We're more saying condition. We're more saying symptoms. We're not really saying that you're ill. But in a way they are, because again, it is a carte blanche for, these pharmaceutical companies to start coming up with, okay, we got to develop a new drug. And, psychiatrists are, just tossing this stuff out there, whatever pill, like candy, it seems. Now, a lot of people will argue that doesn't exactly happen, but whether that's true or not, that psychiatrists are passing out, these various pills for these various disorders, like candy, is true. What seems to be true is that they're refusing to do any kind of alternative, come up with alternative answers to solving these quote unquote disorders. They mentioned ADD. ADD is this is one of my pet peeves. Okay. Because in the 90s, there was a not so famous study, and it's not so famous because, who would want to admit to this? But essentially a natural cure was found for ADD. This isn't conspiratorial, not in like the grand scheme sense of conspiracy. The Illuminati's not behind this, but what they found out is that when they with kids who were, essentially diagnosed with ADD, they extended the recess period at school. They extended it to 2 hours instead of a half hour. When they did that, I might be a little off in the times, but either way, I know they either doubled or tripled, or even quadrupled the time of recess. When they did that, then the kids would come back in and they were actually able to fall asleep just like the other kid, like young kids in school of various like first and second grade, maybe they get like a nap time, right? Or in kindergarten. So these kids with ADD, if they were just allowed to expel their energy instead of sit in a little torture room of a classroom, where they had to sit down and be quiet and pay attention and all this stuff, all these things that kids really, no, let the kid explore. Okay. They don't need to be cooped up. That's antithetical to human growth. But if they were just allowed to expend their energy, amazing. They didn't have ADD. They just have a lot of energy. So, and not a lot of people want to talk about that. And what do you do? Do you give everybody how do you solve this? It's like, well, let's say this is true. Then we got to give every kid 2 hours of recess time. Oh, good. They learn a lot more out during recess than they do in school in the actual classroom. Come on. So, again, whether or not it's true that psychiatrists pass out pills like candy, is regardless in the fact that is very clear. They don't look into alternatives, other than pills, because really, and, passing out medicines, especially medicines as strong as some of the things, designed for to work against ADD, are serious, very, very serious and sometimes very strong, medications that should be a absolute last resort. But instead, there's no first or last resort. There's just only one answer to everything. Give them a pill. And, I understand being disconcerted over this, because now essentially anybody that's a libertarian, anybody that's an anarchist, anybody that doesn't agree with the system, should be drugged. This is very much what was the movie with Christian Bale, Equilibrium, fantastic movie, where everybody had to take a pill to keep their emotions in check. That way society could go on, and there wasn't necessarily war and all that stuff. And of course, what happens when you try to control nature, nature fights back, or, nature, life finds a way, right? That's the old saying from, Goldblum. And, and it's true. What's strange to me, there's so much that could be easily said about oppositional defiant disorder, is that, again, it is being clearly labeled as a disorder, but I would think that that's the natural state of humanity, not a disorder. This should be considered, they should write in the beginning of DSM-6, whenever that comes out, it's like, okay, ODD, odd, is actually normal, and we'll base all of the other illnesses from there. Like, willfully following what the television says, where's the disorder for that? Believing whatever the president says, where's the disorder for that? Those should be considered the disorders. And they're right. This stuff used to be called, just traits, personality traits, like, the Myers-Briggs test, where you have, four main types of personalities. You have people that do, like there's the Guardian personality type, where they do go along with what the bulk of society says, and they kind of defend the traditions and all this stuff. That doesn't make a person ill, really. I mean, I was just kind of being funny there a minute ago. It's who they are. You have these different types of personalities, how they develop. We should be looking into that instead of, looking into the nature and nurture that creates that, instead of figuring out a drug to get everybody to act the same. This really is very, very disturbing to read, that this is official. But it's important to keep in mind that these aren't necessarily new ideas. A few episodes back, I don't remember the episode number, but the episode name was "There Are No More Excuses." During Pick of the Week, I talked about FDR, Franklin Delano Roosevelt's personal correspondence, where he had some really scary things to say about Jews and the Japanese. And in that, he actually said, we cannot trust, he was talking about the Japanese and Jews. He said, we can't trust them to be model citizens. We can't trust them, at all. We can use them, but we can't really trust them because they kind of have a genetic predisposition against authority. And I thought, and boy, I'll tell you, when I first read that article and it said that Jews had a natural, disposition against authority, I was like, yes, because of course I'm Jewish, hell yeah. And so this sort of thing, this is not a new idea. This is something that people have thought for a while that, boy, there's just those damn troublemakers. And, troublemakers, what people need to accept is that troublemakers are actually the ones that push humanity forward. Always have. From the Paleolithic to now. It's always the troublemakers that push everything forward. As soon as you get everybody thinking the same way, when defiance becomes a disorder, you're going to find in pretty short order. That society is just going to fall apart from that. I mean, it's not going to, there's no way you could keep it. You can't, like I mentioned, equilibrium. Another great story about this sort of thing is, Repent Harlequin Said the TikTok Man. It's a short story, one of the most popular short stories in history, literally by Harlan Ellison. And essentially, this one guy just becomes a prankster and starts messing with the entire system with jelly beans and all this other wild stuff. It's a great read. And he's a total, that he gets accused by the authorities and that you're a nonconformist. And he tells them, get stuffed. And so, these people are out there. This idea has been around for a long, long time. Harlan Ellison didn't come up with that. Yes, the story is science fiction. Okay. But I think, he wrote that like any writer does, wrote it out of some degree of personal experience. We need to start celebrating rebels, start celebrating people that really think differently. Another thing I talked about a couple episodes back was where we got an email for the Sex and Science Hour show that the lovely and hyper-intelligent Dr. Stephanie Murphy and I do on the Let's Talk Bitcoin Network, where a guy wrote in and said, how dare you talk about the Big Bang and evolution and Christianity? Some things are just not meant to be talked about. Yeah. I mean, so it's not even... This is the thing. It's not even the DSM-5 or the DSM-4, that lays this out as an illness. You've got people who just, think, yeah, boy, nonconformity is a bad deal. I get worried about that when a lot of people say that there's like certain ways that people should act. Just getting married. That's what you do. That's what it's evolution. Marriage is evolution. And it's what? No, it's not what you should do or what you have to do. You can break out of that. So many things. And so it concerns me because as much as this is like, this is the system telling us, especially telling anarchists and libertarians that, being defiant is a bad thing. I think there's some people in the liberty movement that would have a problem with ODD. We need to watch out for that. I'll be back with more.
Time now for 90 Seconds on Sex with Dr. Paul.
We often focus on a woman's orgasm as being the most important part of her sexual response. Yet the orgasm itself usually lasts less than 30 seconds, while the process of making love, starting with a glance, a text, or kiss, involves so much more. As a woman becomes sexually aroused, the labia, or lips of her genitals, become filled with blood, and they increase in size by as much as 2 to 3 times. They also become more sensitive to touch. And the clitoris fills with blood as well. It swells and becomes whiter as a woman becomes more sexually aroused. At the same time, so much blood flows into the walls of the vagina that it leaves a woman with a sense of fullness or congestion. And it's this increasing supply of blood that actually forces sexual lubrication through the walls of the vagina into the center opening, so it gets wet and slick and intercourse becomes possible. And finally, as she becomes aroused, the back of her vagina will often expand and balloon open, and her cervix will raise up. Now, this is called vaginal tenting, and you can feel it with your fingers if you have them extended into the back part of a woman's vagina when she's becoming more and more turned on. Now, some of the best parts of making love are being aware of these changes in your lover's body and enjoying them as the two of you create them.
For more, visit 90secondsonsex.com.
Software of the Week.
It is time for Software of the Week, where I cover software that is, innovative, something really great to use that has come out, something that has, maybe gone downhill, or something that's just outright terrible. And, I'm kind of doing a double here. This one's going to be real quick, and then I want to talk about the actual Software of the Week. And I may have recommended in the past for a PDF reader to use Foxit PDF reader. And I've recommended it for years. It is now essentially bloatware and malware. There's no point to using Foxit. It installs a bunch of different, just like if you get stuff from download.com, which I tell people never, ever use download.com from CINA ever again. Foxit is just putting crap on your computer, so don't use it. The best thing to do is that if you have, especially if you're using Chrome, is just use the native PDF reader in Chrome. That's really the most solid thing you can do, unless you're paying for like the Adobe Creative Suite. So anyway, I just wanted to get that warning out there. But the real Software of the Week this week is something that's pretty awesome, and it's pretty rare because I don't have iOS devices. It's pretty rare that I talk about on an iOS app, during Software of the Week. But here it is, and it is awesome. It's called Firechat, and it's a messaging app created by the same people that do OpenGarden. It's created by OpenGarden, which I love OpenGarden. It's a mesh networking service, an app. It's been Software of the Week long before, and I've actually had people from OpenGarden on the show. Just a fantastic company. And this Firechat, what does this do? What's the beauty? What's so unique? Because how is it any different from WhatsApp or Wicker or Telegram? It's not going to replace those. Okay. It's certainly not going to replace Telegram. But what's so unique about it is that you don't have to have an internet connection to use it. That's its unique feature. And that's an impressive, unique feature to have. If you're going to have one trick, that's a pretty fucking good trick to do. And so essentially it uses, there's kind of a new software, patch add-on put into iOS 7 called MCF. It's a multi-peer connectivity framework. And no one's really making use of this yet, but it pretty much allows iOS to talk to other, iOS devices, via Bluetooth and whatever, Wi-Fi Direct, whatever it can use, to talk to each other. And it essentially creates a mesh network. Okay. Now, famously, OpenGarden, the software itself that creates a mesh network, doesn't work on iOS because that sort of thing is blocked off. But this is an interesting trade-off, an interesting, unique feature. And so, as long as there's a bunch of nodes going around, as long as a bunch of people have this app installed, you could potentially, if everybody has it installed, you could talk to somebody on the other side of the planet, maybe. Getting overseas might be a little bit of a trick. But you could talk pretty great distances if you had the nodes connecting of people that are using, Firechat. And it's totally anonymous, and as far as I know, it's relatively secure. There is, as far as I know, a kind of a global chat room that they designed for it. And of course, when people are anonymous, people can get pretty toxic in what they talk about and in their language. So, you might want to steer clear of the planetary, or the global chat room that's available for it. But this is really cool. No internet connection, and it works. And I wonder the interesting thing about this, and you can check it out for yourself. Again, I haven't really used it yet, but I'm just excited about the whole prospect of what it can do. What I wonder about is that, and this is something I talked about in a very early episode of Sovryn Tech, where the police, essentially they have controls built into iOS to where they can shut down iOS in a specific area, like at a crime scene or something. This is something that they've worked out, with Apple to some degree. And I wonder if Firechat works around that. And that would make it priceless if it does. Because, certainly when that kind of thing got developed, when that blackout technology got developed, that was back during iOS 5. So, we're 2 iterations up from that. So maybe things have changed. I haven't really looked into it. Admittedly, I don't spend a whole lot of time in the Apple universe. It's okay if you do. They make great stuff. And I mean, this is something Android doesn't have this. I'm sure they could implement it somehow if Android updated to some kind of MCF. So, but check it out. Firechat. Really, really exciting forward-thinking stuff. I'll be back with more. This is Sovryn.
From Big Finish Productions, Blake 7, The Classic Audio Adventures.
I'm taking Liberator in on manual. We'll be in teleport range in 2 minutes.
What the hell was that?
Information. Liberator has been attacked.
You don't say.
Put up the force wall.
Confirm.
Message to all ground commanders. Initiate the final phase. Let's crush these rebels once and for all.
My name is Avon. Kerr Avon.
Kerr Avon.
Our hostage arrives. But you may be unnecessary.
As a hostage, it's nice to be superfluous.
You can go to Blake7.com to find more of the new adventures of one of science fiction's greatest masterpieces, Blake 7, at Blake7.com. It is time for listener emails, a segment of the show that is really becoming pretty popular. I think I might have already said that before, but a lot of people are... I've actually had requests this week where people are saying you need to extend the listener email segment, and I'm just... my concern is that a lot of people ask questions that aren't necessarily science or tech related, and that's okay. The listener email segment is totally open. To whatever question. And we've got quite a few that I'm going to go through. And because of that, again, a lot of times it's not science or technology. So, but I'm worried that if I expanded it, then the show would kind of lose some of its science and technology edge. So at the moment, I have no plans to expand this segment of the show, but I really appreciate that people, enjoy what I have to say about a lot of things. And speaking of enjoy, I do want to read a couple of nice emails that people sent in, saying, hey, I enjoy the show. And so I want to read just a couple of them here. And one of them, hey, Brian, great show. I'm a new listener brought on from Let's Talk Bitcoin's Sex and Science Hour. I'm truly inspired by you guys to live free and envision a bright future. I was stuck in that Spock mentality, but I've reconsidered. Now, that's, of course, a reference to episode 66, the last episode I did, where I opened up and there was a, kind of a diatribe between Kirk and Spock, where, Kirk was saying, peace is the way, and a revolution only needs one man with a vision, all that stuff. So anyway, he said a couple comments. I'm optimistic about Google's Glass. I feel that this sort of tech can make us more aware of how we are perceived objectively in a positive way. What do you have against it? Well, I'll answer that pretty quick. My concern is that, who holds the keys to what Google Glass kind of sees. Like Google Glass, I think would be great in a world without governments. But I worry that something of that nature, where we're just like, there's just camera everywhere. And I guess we already have cameras everywhere. Maybe we should just kind of accept Panopticon. But my concern at this point in time is that, governments would just have such easy access to seeing everything that's going on, as to where maybe they don't have as easy access yet. And if a person is concerned about privacy, a lot of people walking around with cameras on all the time, I understand they're concerned against this. So really it's just a privacy thing, not necessarily a technology thing, though I don't think the human eye is designed to constantly have an image beamed against it. And, I could go into that more, but that's a pretty basic thing. A lot of it is the privacy issue. I can talk about other things in the future. There's going to be plenty of Google Glass stories to come. So, anyway, thank you for the email. I'm glad you found this show through whatever venue. A lot of people have emailed, said they found it through Free Talk Live. That's great. I'm glad that you found what I have to say on those other shows like Sex and Science Hour and Let's Talk, and Free Talk Live, that you wanted to check out my show. And I'm really glad that you're here. And please don't hesitate to listen to the back catalog. We're almost 100 episodes in, including specials, altogether, we're almost 100 episodes in. So, please check them all out. They're all pretty timeless, so do enjoy. And thank you very much. The other nice email I wanted to read, my name is Matthew Albrecht, and I have been a listener since your first show. And I have to say that yours is absolutely one of my favorites. I continually learn new things every show. I want to thank you for introducing me to FIVA. I have my first Bitcoin wallet. FIVA, of course, is the iOS native client solution that was very cleverly came up with. That I talked about a couple episodes back. As I journey on my quest for knowledge, I can cite your show to be an integral part of my learning process, and I thank you again. Keep up the great work, and thank you. And he specifically asked to, he said he didn't care about his anonymity, so, he wanted to be named, so I name it. Normally, I give you a degree of anonymity. Now, so we got those out. Thank you very much for those emails. It's really nice to read those things. Again, I don't always know how to react to the fact that the tech show changes people's lives. Not that they were saying that, but just that they, really, really enjoy it. And I'm glad I am here to entertain and hopefully inform to some degree. So I got a bunch of questions to get through. One of them is, you were in the Army. Was there any positive experience that you feel you got out of the Army? A positive experience or a good memory that I have is that one time I was with a group and we were setting up a base on a rock face. And it was really, really difficult. And I actually asked the guy, I was like, okay, how exactly are we going to pull this off? And his response was classic. His response was, on Arrakis, we use desert power. I just died laughing. It was such a great, of course, it's a Dune reference. It was so good. So that's the only positive experience I can really remember from the military. So there you have it. And next question is, in the last episode, you were talking about manhood and Maven, and these are, okay. These are both products. The Maven is essentially a cock bumper that keeps you from going too deep, into a woman or into a male. And then the manhood is it's supposed to replicate what your foreskin would do over your penis, protect it and keep it sensitive, essentially. And we'll read on the email. You seem to be inferring that you have a large dick. Is this true? Yes. Okay. Moving on. I was really nervous about that, talking about that, because so many people, they just come out with this machismo and bravado. It's like, oh, yeah, I got a big dick and all this crap. Anyway, yes, that I was inferring that if that wasn't clear. I imagine the emailer was kind of being funny. Anyway, let's see. What's the next one? What's the biggest change in technology you've seen in the past 10 years? Great question. And actually the biggest change I've seen in technology is not like everything going to the internet in the past 10 years. So this would be, we'll say the early aughts, maybe. The biggest change that I've seen is the lack of off buttons. I don't know if you've noticed this, but you're probably going to notice it now that I've said it. But literally, off buttons are disappearing. Power. I mean, there's an on button, but off buttons are just, they're not one and the same. The on button and the off button aren't one and the same. It's more like a wake button. It's not an on-off switch. Okay. Switches in particular are disappearing. In fact, I remember one of my first computers, a 386. I mean, it had this big red switch on the side of the computer, that you really had to flick. I mean, it was serious. It actually took effort to turn it on. Off buttons are just totally disappearing from things. And this is, to my mind, this is the biggest change that's happened in technology over the past, 10, maybe 15 years. I don't know. The first time I noticed like off buttons starting to disappear was when DVD players came out. So, 99, 2000, something like that. I guess that fits within the time range we're kind of talking about. People can get conspiratorial about that. I've never really heard anybody get conspiratorial about it. My thoughts on it kind of tend towards that. When you look at like LG had, their TVs were, effectively spying on people, or like Microsoft with their Kinect, where they admit that it's, it's collecting data on everything that's happening in the room. And people have raised, not crazy people, but, just normal people have raised privacy concerns over all of these things. I think off buttons disappearing, are a real problem, as far as that goes. I also think the fact that batteries can't get removed from devices, this kind of falls under the same thing as an off switch. Laptops today are coming with where you can't remove the battery anymore. Cell phones, smartphones, are, most models, you can't remove the battery anymore. Now that's unfortunate because you can't also upgrade the battery that goes for the laptop and the smartphones, and put in a bigger one. You don't mind if the phone is clunky, if it can go for 2 days, right? That's unfortunate, but what's the purpose to that? Well, a lot of people think the purpose to that is that because of the firmware that ARM processors work on, or, and of course, a lot of laptops are now using ARM processors as well. You can, ARM processors send and receive, or they respond to any signal that gets sent to them. And the only way you can really stop that is by pulling the battery on it. Okay, so essentially, the theory goes, there is conspiracy about this, where people think that the fact that there aren't removable batteries anymore, is the fact that, and I talked about this, I think, in the Dark Android special that I did, where they could track you, your tracker. A lot of people call their cell phones trackers, and that I don't think that's inaccurate. As long as it still has a little bit of juice, they can track where you are. And so having, not being able to remove the battery, that's a concern. And same thing, I guess, maybe it's the same logic that I'm thinking, is that the fact that there isn't off buttons. It really kind of sucks. And in fact, it's kind of strange too, because, we're supposed to be in this, like everything's supposed to be very green technology. And I'm not against green technology. I'm not against efficiency. Okay. For everything to kind of like be hummed and hibernated on, and just be asleep, not actually being off, that's really kind of taking up more energy. I know some people will make the claim that, well, turning it on takes so much energy, it's actually better to just have it sleep or to hibernate or whatever, have the device or computer sleep or hibernate. Maybe. I don't think those numbers add up. I think it's just better to have something off. Of course, you can always just unplug, right? That's the gaffe to the lack of off buttons. For most things, I think that's true. You can just unplug it and that's fine. But of course, that can be a pain in the butt in and of itself, as to where you could just turn the damn thing off. So that's kind of the biggest change I can think of in the past 10 years that has come around is the disappearing off buttons. And let's see, in the same email, the next question is what technology besides Bitcoin do you really see as essentially saying set everything free, bring personal liberty to people? MadeSafe, boy, I'll tell you again, listen to that last special I did, with MadeSafe. You listen to David and you're just like, wow, this is the real shit. This is what's going to do it. And so you can check that out, but before MadeSafe and maybe even after MadeSafe, if I can, kind of wax fantastic here, and go all the way. What I think is actually what would be the most freeing technology. And I don't know if I've ever talked about it on Sovereign Tech before, but what I think would be the most freeing technology and would end governments almost instantaneously, would end not just governments, but I think it would end domination culture. Okay. In its entirety. would be personal force fields. Kind of like you see on Dune, or, just picture the, the force field around a starship, the shields around a starship, that keep things from penetrating, the bubble around them. If we all had our own personal bubble around us that could, fend off, everything from a rocket to a fist, I think that would be the most freeing technology. And in fact, I'm kind of disappointed. I've yet to really find a company that is actually developing force fields, and sure, yes, I understand. Believe me, I have a good grasp of the science behind it, and there's a reason why not a lot of people are developing this sort of thing. There's people developing like scrambler fields. That's very different. Okay. From what I'm talking about. I'm talking about something that would literally keep, like I said, from someone punching you to someone, firing an M60 nearby, whatever, it would stop all of it. That would be the most liberating, technology in history, in my opinion. Nothing else would even come close. And if it was powered by solar energy or whatever, then of course, how do the UV rays get through, if it can fend off all this stuff? Look, I don't know. I don't know the science behind it. I'm just telling you, as far as like a wacky idea, okay, that would actually be, the most freeing possible technology. I think that would be it. Because then what, once the use of force is, eliminated, abolished, once it's gone and it's totally impotent, then it doesn't matter anymore. Everything stops. Theft stops, rape stops, tax collection stops, war stops because you can't hurt anybody, I'd love to write a science fiction story about a society where they have this personal force field and just what that would look like. I think that'd be an interesting thing. And maybe I'll do that. I have friends who have venues that I think are still open to me because they are great friends. Maybe I'll shoot for something like that. So that's, that's my answer. Again, as far as like what actually exists out there right now. Yeah. I think things like, the various cryptocurrencies that are coming out, or crypto platforms, whatever you want to call them. Like MadeSafe is more, I think that's safe to call that a crypto platform that has a currency built into it too. Much like Ethereum kind of has the same thing. So does NXT, where they have actual kind of a currency within itself, within the platform, and the platform does all this stuff. But I'm more excited about, as far as like those being the liberating technologies, I'm very excited about MadeSafe, because MadeSafe doesn't have that centralizing blockchain requirement, as in, to use, well, NXT doesn't really either, but like Ethereum has blockchains. And so you've got to have the entire blockchain on your computer or somewhere. Some server somewhere has to have the entire blockchain. As to where you take something like NXT, well, NXT still has some degree of a centralizing feature, though it's definitely the best of the bunch. But MadeSafe has no centralizing feature at all. So, that's definitely, as far as what's on the roadmap right now, what can we achieve in the next months or just few years? That MadeSafe will probably be the most liberating technology that I can think of at the moment. So, and if I come up with something else, I'll address it.
Hey, Brian, what's that funny sticker over your laptop webcam? I was trying to spy on you while you were in the shower, but now I can't.
See, that's why I have it. And it's from EFF.org.
EFF, what's that?
It's the Electronic Frontier Foundation, totally donor-funded organization that fights for internet freedom, privacy.
Wow, that sounds great. So EFF.org, I support internet freedom and privacy, and maybe you do too.
Yeah, and you can support them with Bitcoin.
The Electronic Frontier Foundation at EFF.org.
Brian! Stop playing those video games!
Just a minute, Mom.
Game Talk.
It is time for Game Talk, where we talk video games. And oh boy, was there an announcement this past week that really shook a lot of people up, and it's perfect. It's a perfect full circle in Game Talk, because the past 2 weeks, the two topics I talked about, one was Oculus Rift, and the other was Kickstarter. And now these stories have coalesced and come together because Facebook bought the Oculus Rift for $2 billion. Now, the Oculus Rift, for those that don't know, is essentially a virtual reality headset, and it's a good one. In fact, I talked about, it's designed for gaming, but when I talked about it last on Sovryn Tech a couple episodes back, I was talking about how it had like the virtual cinema feature, that actually a lot of its features that had nothing to do with gaming were the real reason to buy it. I was totally signed up, to get it. And now since Facebook bought it, I don't know. Anyway, I'm going to read a bit of an article here from GameSpot by Tom McShay. And an angry roar erupted across the internet yesterday. Facebook, that omnipresent, unavoidable social media corporation, had purchased Oculus VR for $2 billion. The pioneers of modern-day virtual reality had given up their self-ownership for a sum greater than the gross national product of Greenland, consumed by a company sewn into the very fabric of our social structure. Resentment spread like wildfire as many of those who had helped fund the Oculus Rift when it was nothing more than a far-off promise on Kickstarter were blindsided by the transaction. Oculus VR had betrayed those who had believed in the company, sold out to an unworthy website, and destroyed the goodwill it had fostered. People were livid, and I can sympathize with those feelings, but we have learned a valuable lesson. Giving money on Kickstarter does not mean we have any say in a company's decision. In an idealized point of view, Kickstarter has transformed the high-stakes game of startup investment into something that anyone with spare change can take part in. Creators propose an idea, and those whose interest is piqued give money to see that such a product can materialize. Books and movies are funded in this manner, and games that would have never found a publisher are brought to life by the people who are most passionate in digital entertainment. Studios are formed, companies graduate from tinkering in garages to working in proper offices, and all because people have spoken loud and clear with their wallets. The job of venture capitalists has been brought to the masses. No longer do you need millions of dollars to invest in something that tickles your fancy. People have the power, and a large group can scrounge up enough cash to bring any project to life. We felt a sense of ownership in every project we choose to fund on Kickstarter. This is true no matter what we're giving money to. I imagine we would see similar unrest if Double Fine had sold Broken Age to Electronic Arts. But it's even more difficult to shake the notion in this example. People didn't give money to make just another game. No, the people who helped kickstart the Oculus Rift birthed an entire company. Oculus VR is nothing without its virtual reality headset, and because its very existence depends on those who financed it years ago via Kickstarter, we thought of them as a grassroots company that listened to us, and that feeling has changed now that Facebook owns them. We have to keep in mind that a Kickstarter backer and a venture capitalist are not the same roles, and it's this disconnect that has led to the gnashing of teeth and the heated posts on message boards. Although a venture capitalist may own a piece of the company or get cash return on the investment once profitability is reached, nothing is owed a Kickstarter backer beyond the milestone rewards posted on each page. Everyone has intrinsic knowledge that this is the case. We know that if we pledge a certain amount of money, we get a copy of a game when it comes out, assuming it ever does, or that our name will appear in the credits. Rationally, we know that we're going to receive only what has been spelled out. We do not own a part of the company, nor do we receive a dividend from profits made. We know all this, but knowledge only matters to a certain point. Emotions can overwhelm even the most grounded of individuals, and we see an outpouring of emotions in the angry reaction to this high-tech transaction. So I'm going to skip ahead a little bit here. Let's see, here it is. Facebook was not willing to spend money on the Oculus VR, on what Oculus VR might be capable of years ago when the Kickstarter campaign was launched. It was not willing to spend billions of dollars to become an early backer in the next generation of virtual reality. No, it was not a giant corporation that saw the brilliance of this device. It was ordinary people who did, people with a vision and just enough extra money to see their dream realized. And though we know that nothing more than the stated rewards are owed to backers, that doesn't matter. People gave Oculus VR money when the company needed it most, and now that Oculus has more cash than any of us can fathom, many feel as if their baby has turned its back on them. After all, it wouldn't have ever reached these heights without investments from the people. Why shouldn't the backers be rewarded for having such strong belief in virtual reality when no one did? I'm going to skip ahead again. For those who are still angry, I understand, and it's fine to shout and yell and let your voices be heard. Think about how you feel now and don't forget it. Kickstarter is not going to change. You have to decide if you're comfortable giving money to a company just so it can potentially become incredibly rich in the future. And understand that no contract has been broken. Oculus VR did what it believed is best for the company, and we can only hope that Facebook stands by its word and will not interfere in the Rift's development going forward. I understand why you're angry, but we have to accept that reality will not always bend to our whims. And of course, you can read the whole story in the show notes, sovereigntech.com. Check it out. And it's a pretty lengthy story, and it's a worthy read. Facebook, admittedly, like mentioned in the last paragraph there, Facebook is notorious for leaving things alone. Instagram, they bought out Instagram. They left Instagram alone, and Instagram still works very, very well. It might have a tight integration into being able to work with Facebook better than it does other social media outfits. But essentially it is a company that is left alone. WhatsApp so far has been left alone. That also got purchased by Facebook. Here's my problem. Okay. I don't know that a whole lot of change is going to occur with what Oculus Rift set out to do, especially with its first generation product. But here's my concern is that, and we talked about this earlier, like with the quizzes, okay, where companies are funded by advertising. And I'm very concerned when a company like Facebook will probably say something like, with buying Oculus, and I'm sure they probably pitched this to Oculus saying, hey guys, we buy you out. We can get your headset out there for a whole hell of a lot cheaper price. We'll subsidize it with advertising. Now I'm concerned about that because you got, just on the face value, but yes, that was a pun. On the face value that this thing is right on your face and you're going to get advertised just like almost as close to your eyeball as Google Glass is. And believe me, advertising is coming for Google Glass. I don't care if Google says they won't allow for it. It's going to happen. Okay. I really, come on, give me a break. Let me buy a product, for a full price. I'll pay $600 for Oculus Rift. Okay. So I don't have to get advertising. Like when I get a Kindle, I pay for, the lovely and hyper intelligent Dr. Stephanie Murphy got my last Kindle for me. And she specifically made sure there was no, she bought the more expensive version that took out the ads. People will pay for that. Give them that option. As long as that option exists, I feel a little bit better. Okay, that's why I don't knock Amazon for it. Okay, because that's how they subsidize their devices. There's no reason Facebook wouldn't do that too. I think they would. So I'm concerned about the advertising aspect of this. Okay, it's like any video game. Okay. And PlayStation used to do this where they'd put, the original PlayStation, this was popular when CD-ROM games first came out because there's a lot of extra space. What do we put in this? And so they put in trailers for other games and all this stuff. And it's like, look, I just hashed out $50, $60 for this. I don't want to see advertisements for anything else. I just want to get to my game and play it. I paid enough money. And I'm concerned that maybe there's no such thing as enough money anymore. When you pay for something, we're still going to force feed you these fucking advertisements, which I'm not saying advertisements are evil. I'm just saying if you, consciously just don't want these things, and I don't, okay. It's just like, it's the same problem with, we mentioned the LG TVs. I think there was Samsung TVs did the same thing, where when you turn the volume down on the television, a fucking ad popped up underneath the volume bar. Come on. I paid $10,000 for the TV. Can I not have the ad? Is that okay? Did I not pay enough for this device? Fuck. I don't want to see it. No, I don't want to buy Rice Krispies. So I'm concerned that that's coming to what otherwise looked like a very pure product. The other thing too is that, you know, I understand where a lot of people are coming from, where they, you know, this is annoying because Facebook, if Facebook thought Oculus was such a great goddamned idea, why didn't they fund it, you know, 4 years ago or 3 years, however long ago it was? Yeah, it feels like a backstab. I don't blame people for feeling that way. No one did anything wrong. Nobody broke contract. Look, I get it. I fucking understand that. Okay. I'm just saying you can't help but feel bad about it. It's like, okay, you know, well, we helped you get there. Maybe could we get something in return from that? You know, beyond the thing on the side or whatever. There's something does feel off about it, especially with Facebook. And I can't help but think that Facebook's actual interest in this has nothing to do with great gaming, has nothing to do with, you know, a lot of the other, listen to a couple episodes back of Sovryn Tech and you can hear about the other things Oculus can do. Has nothing to do with any desire to that. I think this is a dick measuring contest between Google and Facebook. Oh yeah, you got Google Glass, I got Oculus Rift. I'm going to see you. And in fact, I mean, maybe that's what they're doing is they're trying to get ahead of the AR game, way ahead of Google, you know, to where, you know, Google's going to, project a little image on your eye. Facebook's going to project an entire world in front of you that you can see. That's my prediction for where this is going to go. This purchase is all about competing down the line. First generation products probably going to turn out to be the same, so that Facebook looks good as far as their word of not interfering. But after that, this is going to turn into, you know, or the development team is going to start working on a glass competitor, and it's going to be Google Glass on steroids. And I have no interest in that. You know, and I certainly wouldn't have Kickstarter campaign, you know, I wouldn't have funded a campaign that would bring out that product.
Tonight, Knight Rider crashes into your living room.
I don't believe this.
Well, you'd better believe it. A lone crusader for justice drives this crime crasher.
The world's most fantastic car.
And together they can do just about anything.
After all, we're only human.
Don't press your luck.
And now buckle up for action with the fastest show on television, Knight Rider.
See Knight Rider online today. And now back to Sovryn Tech.
Wow. It's a website of the week.
It is time for a website of the week where I'll cover a website that I find interesting. Sometimes it's a terrible website. Sometimes it's something fun or, you know, maybe useful. Sometimes it blurs the line with software. But this week, this is really cool. I like this website, and it's TeslaCollection.com. No, this is not Tesla, the car. This is actually Nikola Tesla, who, of course, the you know, infamous, maybe famous might not be the best word, the infamous scientist from the, you know, the early 20th century, or, you know, actually lived pretty good into the 20th century. And this is a collection of, you know, it's probably the most comprehensive collection. I mean, it has newspaper articles, you know, all kinds of periodical materials, stuff from his books. I mean, there's anything that pretty much got put to print about Nikola Tesla, you can find, or at least you're going to get your best chance of finding at TeslaCollection.com. And I think this is really, really great to, you know, to research. And, you know, there's a search engine built into it. This is wonderful. This is kind of the thing, a website like this. And I, you know, go ahead and check it out. Again, TeslaCollection.com. A website like this is sort of what people were expecting the internet to be in the 90s. You know, people thought of the internet. They didn't think of when they thought of the internet, they didn't think of something like Facebook or Twitter, or even YouTube. They thought about, okay, this is going to be, every book on the planet is going to be available online, and you're going to be able to instantaneously search it, and you're going to be able to read everything for free or whatever. That's sort of what they had in mind, is that it would be this, you know, this library of Pergamum en masse, digital en masse. And I like that idea for the internet. I mean, it can be so much more, and we still don't know, you know, what exactly the internet's really going to shape up to be. You know, even if it's in its current incarnation is still around even 5 years from now. But this is definitely, you know, appeals to that crowd, to where, yes, you can search everything that has anything to do with Tesla. And that's useful, because Tesla is a very controversial guy. I mean, it's useful for anybody, but for him in particular, he is a person that, there's definitely a ton of conspiracy theories around him, that he came up with free energy, that all kinds of wild things, that he came up with, some degree of like mass mind control. I mean, you name it, but you can go to, now you can go to teslacollection.com and research the stuff for yourself. Type in the relevant words to such things, like type in free energy, see what comes up, what articles come up, what did he actually have to say about that? And that's great because it goes well beyond any book that I've seen about Tesla. Because it does have the newspaper articles, and it's a collection that's growing as well. So just a super handy website. And it's good too, because you get to kind of get behind the myth. A lot of people have a very high, hold a high opinion of Tesla. I do too. Okay. I dare venture him to be a hero, but he held a lot of very, very oddball beliefs, and definitely, beliefs that I wouldn't agree with. Like, I mean, he was definitely a conservative, I mean, he was very conventional, his experiments, his science wasn't conventional at all, but his outlook on life, as far as we can tell, was pretty conventional. But don't take my word for it. Go to teslacollection.com and you can look into it for yourself. See, I mean, like he was really big about being super clean and kind of funny about sex and all this stuff. It's interesting to read, but now here's your chance. teslacollection.com. I'll be back with more.
Hey everybody, it's Stephanie. I am the Sovryn Tech producer, but did you know I am also a voiceover artist? Yes, it's true. I make audiobooks, commercials for your business. I narrate explainer videos. Pretty much any audio project that you can think of, I'm probably willing to work on it, or I have worked on it in the past. And if you want to hear some samples of my previous work, or you want to find out a little bit more about what I do, then I encourage you to check out my voiceover website, which is smvoice.info, smvoice.info. Now back to Sovryn Tech. Hacker Stories.
It is time for Hacker Stories, where I talk about stories that, they have to do with what I consider the real heroes of planet Earth, that being hackers. And this week, this is something, I had a different idea for Hacker Stories when I first started this show. This was before the Snowden revelations happened. And my plan is that I wanted to tell, the reason it's called Hacker Stories, because now it's kind of turned into like the security issues segment of the show. I literally wanted it to be stories like from hacker magazines, throughout history, not just, modern relevant, or not just modern stories, but, stories from the past that are relevant, that occurred to various hackers throughout time, because hackers have been around for a very long time, since the 60s. And, depending on how you want to define it, even earlier. And so this week I'm actually going to read a story, a literal hacker story. This is what I originally wanted. And I kept saying I'd get back to it at some point. And this week I'm going to do it. I'm going to get back to it. Don't worry. Next week I'll talk about some kind of security issue. I've got an article actually that dovetails with last week's article about Walmart. We will go into that. Okay. But this week I want to do something. I want to shake it up. All right. And I want to read an actual hacker story. And so this is from an issue of 2600, and it's The Making of a Psuedo-Felon, and it's from the autumn issue in 2000. So, this is 14-year-old stuff. And it's by Brent. It's by Brent Ranney. I'm bored and depressed. I think I'll hack extenders for 7 days, 24 hours a day. It's relatively harmless, isn't it? At the age of 19, home from college, around the time of Thanksgiving 1993, I used a 386 computer, a special computer program, and a 2400 BPS modem to conduct hacking activity on Midwest-based LDDS Metromedia Communications to obtain phone access codes through its service. In other words, I tried to cheat the telephone company. Tried to cheat the telephone company probably to make long distance calls with those codes. Look up some of these phrases like in Wikipedia if you're not sure what exactly. We wouldn't be able to get through the story if I had to explain every bit of technobabble that this guy's talking about. Though it's not babble, it's legit. In the middle of the night, I took a printout of access numbers the computer program generated and strolled over to a payphone. I tested every access code. This is back when long distance cost a lot of money. They all failed to work despite the computer program logging them as valid with the carrier signal. When I returned to school, everything appeared normal. I was oblivious to the fact that a federal search warrant had been obtained to search my dorm room. My friend and I were unaware of anything amiss when we entered our dorm building on an early winter evening. An anonymous student had tipped me off earlier in the parking lot that the school was considering me as a suspect for internal PBX abuse. I was not involved and knew nothing about it. Before we entered the elevator to reach our floor, a student followed. There are FBI agents running around on the third floor. That's our floor, I thought. It must be drugs or something. I felt bad for whoever was getting arrested. Though feeling uneasy, I garnered some comfort in thinking it probably had nothing to do with me. A pudgy man, his face almost blushing, was standing in front of my door conspicuously. The guy greeting me outside my dorm room happened to be the area manager of security for the local telephone company. "Are you Brent?" he queried. "Yes," I said. The phone cop, he calls him a phone cop. The phone cop turned around to face the door. He knocked 2 or 3 times. Immediately, the door flew open and the barrels of small handguns were pointed at me, wielded by men dressed in what you might call land warrior nerd attire. They were wearing telemarketer headsets, and I heard the crackling of walkie-talkies. So they look like a bunch of G.I. Joes. I don't remember the specifics. All I know is that I was facing the other way, my hands against the wall, up above my head. "What is this?" I asked. They frisked me and my friend. "Do you have any weapons? Any knives, guns?" "No," I said, flabbergasted. On cue, an agent flashed his ID. It wasn't the FBI after all. It was the Secret Service. I was shocked. Everything seemed to go in slow motion. I didn't feel like it was really happening. I was so nervous. I asked for a lawyer. A couple hours later, I find myself in an empty holding cell after submitting to fingerprints, pictures, and idle chit-chat. I had a friend whose father was on duty as a cop the night when I came into the police station. He looked like a stereotypical hacker, his father later told him. Apparently, the man had seen a lot of hackers coming through the station, small as the town was, and he could spot them immediately. Before I was left alone in the cell to lament my sins, another cop stayed behind and eyeballed me for a long minute. His look shot the message, "You're going to get it bad, boy, and you are a bad boy no matter what you think." I signed a waiver for release, relinquishing some of my rights. I was released from police custody and returned to my dorm, a new man stripped of all my electronic possessions. They had taken every computer-related article I had, every disc, every issue of 2600. A year later, 2600 being the Hacker Quarterly that we're reading from. It's a very popular magazine. I love it. A year later, after my conviction, everything was returned, mostly broken. I just wish they hadn't destroyed the computer artwork I painstakingly created. I withdrew from the school. I hoped you get away with it, my political science professor told me as I bid him farewell. I hate the phone company, he added. I met with the Secret Service agent again at a later date. Whenever I met the agent, the phone cop was with him, always present under some shadowy pretense, like Cancer Man from the X-Files. I was encouraged, implicitly pressured to reveal information on other people who committed crimes. I told them about real criminals I was aware of, people who were profiting from fraud, like the government. In these closed-door sessions, I admitted illegally obtaining the access codes and divulged every detail about the crime. Prior to my actual arrest, the area manager of security for the local telephone company contacted my mother and promised I would not be arrested or prosecuted, with the understanding that they just wanted me to stop. He told her I was responsible for $100,000 in damages. Unfortunately, she believed his white lie. He told her that if she didn't cooperate by disclosing my whereabouts, she would be an accessory to the crime. Regardless of what was promised, I openly confessed to involvement, unknowing of the unscrupulous tactics employed on my mother. A year later, I pled guilty to possession of access codes with intent to defraud. I was sentenced to 3 years probation, fined $500, in order to participate in a halfway house program for 2 months. Throughout my probation, I was tested for drugs. I had no drug history. What I did possess was long hair and a penchant for black clothing. It's interesting, minus the long hair. My offense is a felony for one reason and one reason only. The access codes could be used to call out to any state. Because of this interstate characteristic, it is federal and therefore a felony charge. No losses were reported by any of the respective long-distance companies I had tampered with, although the local company claimed a loss of about $17 to $30 in administrative fees. The judge and prosecution rationalized that taxpayers are indirectly victimized because of the cost related to investigations and prosecution of major cases such as mine. I'm going to skip ahead a little bit. There's no distinction today between a crime of violence and a recreational hacker. I don't expect there ever will be. How do you explain the proverbial scarlet letter to the uninformed public who thinks hackers like Kevin Mitnick are diabolical monsters? And Kevin Mitnick is not a diabolical monster. 7 years later, I don't justify what I did back in '93, but society shouldn't exaggerate the impact of it either. The interests of the multi-million-dollar corporations have been protected, rest assured. Kevin Mitnick was silenced, and before him, so were many lesser-known hackers. The branding is done. It's over. No appeals, no expunging. I am a convicted felon for life. Are we made to be examples to sway public fear and distrust? Is this the result of manufactured propaganda to serve corporate interest? Should the minor aggravation of a corporation result in a lifetime felony conviction for a college kid? I'm not hiding anything, and I accept responsibility for something I should have never done for the sake of curiosity to make a few free phone calls. Kevin Mitnick is, dare I say, an astute genius, but not a criminal mastermind. I was psychologically evaluated by the government and labeled off the record as not having criminal thinking patterns. I've always considered myself an ethical person despite Ma Bell groupies, Ma Bell being, the big phone company, who considered one guy with a few access codes to be of critical importance to the subversion of a nation. Well, he would probably have ODD, right? That we talked about earlier. I mean, they didn't have it back then in 93, but anyway, not abiding contemporary law has disproportionate consequences depending on whether or not the violation of the law involves life and limb or involves property. If you are thinking about tinkering with the phone company or other mega corporations, think twice. Then consider beating your wife instead. By example of length of sentences served, this act is more acceptable to our society. But God forbid, don't get caught, quote unquote, beating your wife while in possession of a red box. And of course, a red box is a hacker tool. And I'm just going to finish up here. He has afterthoughts. Since my conviction in the early 90s, I've ceased participating in any hacking activity, anything that might be construed as illegal. Frankly, I absolutely shudder at the thought. I don't keep myself privy to the latest hacking tools. I flee from gray areas of computer activity. I am 100% dedicated to a philosophy of anti-hacking. Call it fear, call it cowardice, but I capitulate with tyranny when it threatens my well-being. Paranoia is now a part of my everyday life. I wasn't always that way. I used to stand up for myself, but the futility of raising arms against 1,000,000 to 1 odds is not my cup of tea. But there are others more courageous than me who face these odds every day. You may know them: Bernie S., Kevin Mitnick, the staff of 2600, and nameless others in America and in third world countries. By writing this article, authoring it with my real name, I fear I'm jeopardizing my well-being. Without any prodding of our imagination, we can assume the Secret Service peruses 2600, and if the SS thinks I've somehow resurfaced as a threat, they may conceivably pay me a visit. Like Bernie S., they may want to check my wiring. I don't have a vendetta. I'm just telling a story and offering an opinion. I haven't voiced my disapproval in a domain name like 2600, but I wonder, how is writing an opinionated article any different? To the credit of law enforcement, in particular the probation department, I was treated humanely. That's really disturbing. And we don't have a whole lot of time to talk about it, but the fact that people, out of crimes of curiosity and just figuring out ways around the system like Bitcoin, just get the book thrown at them, get just these outlandish crimes that aren't really crimes at all put against them and get squashed by governments and corporations, corporatism, right? That's been going on for a while, not new. And it's because corporations and governments are afraid of people that can figure this stuff out. They're afraid of you. You don't have to be afraid of them.
What does freedom mean? Tune in to LRN.FM to find out. LRN.FM is the Liberty Radio Network, a collection of live talk radio and podcasts, all coming from a principled pro-liberty perspective. LRN.FM show hosts aren't left, right, or conspiracy kooks. You can tune in 24/7 to LRN.FM via your phone, computer, satellite, and more. Listen free anytime at LRN.FM. That's LRN.FM.
Would you like to play a game? Game of the Week.
It is time for Game of the Week, where I cover a game that maybe is under the radar, didn't get discussed with all these AAA games that come out, or maybe it's something that needs a good reinstall, a good classic. Maybe that's resurfaced on new platforms. Sometimes, too, I talk about games that are up and coming, that are going to be coming out soon. And this is one I want to make sure, I talked about it when they first announced this. I think I did the entire game talk on it. But I just want to, I'm kind of doing this, I guess, as a reminder that it's out there. And the game is Star Citizen. And this is huge. It's made by Chris Roberts, who is the same guy that made Wing Commander, which are, to me, not just video games, but it's such an important franchise. It was such an important story. It had so much going for it. Chris Roberts is just a brilliant storyteller, brilliant designer. And if you loved the Wing Commander games, if you remember those, you're going to want to be on board with Star Citizen. This is just an amazing looking game. So it's a flight simulator. This is like a massive multiplayer, flight simulator. There was talk of this kind of thing being done in the early aughts. And at the time they called it Wing Commander Online. In fact, I think there's still some private people trying to do that. But Star Citizen, it looks by and large like pretty much Chris Roberts is just, he can't get the rights to Wing Commander. And so he's just creating a new universe, but it's essentially Wing Commander. So, so you're almost playing a Wing Commander alternate universe here. And so it's a space simulator. You fly around in whatever various starships you have or fighters. And I would imagine, there's some degree of walking around on these ships and on star bases and all this stuff. And it's kind of a two-pronged game. There's, the massive multiplayer version of it, which is Star Citizen. But then there's also a single player and a co-op version of the game called Squadron 42, which that'll probably have a more sprawling story to tell you about the universe. And then this is huge. And this game has set a ton of records because, it's made just in private funding. Partly through a Kickstarter campaign and partly through private funding. It's made millions of dollars already. This is going to be a big deal. And, like I talked about last week, you got to worry about whether or not these companies are actually going to finish their game. Well, in this case, you're dealing with Chris Roberts, who I think is a guy that, especially left to his own devices, really always delivers the goods. And so this is one where you can put money in it and I think you can trust it. People have already gotten perks from it, like t-shirts and cards and all this stuff. They're doing everything right. This, as far as, privately, crowdfunding a game, this is the cream of the crop as far as crowdfunding games go. So my only caveat with it really is that so far, maybe this will change. I think there's stretch goals in crowdfunding, right? Where if you make this much, then they'll do this next achievement. So maybe there's a stretch goal for this and I don't know about it, but by and large, this is only going to be out for Windows. And I think that's a loss. It is a game that runs on CryEngine 3. And up until a couple months ago, that made sense as to why it would only be on Windows, because CryEngine 3 generally only works on Windows. But that's not true anymore, because actually Crytek, the people that make the game engine CryEngine 3, said that they are testing it out for Linux now. They're already porting games into Linux. They use CryEngine. And so, there's no reason for it not to go to, to go to Linux as well, because, again, I mean, especially with Steam boxes, these are things that are going to really, take over. I think the living room, they're going to take over, the entire gaming space. That's just my prediction. That, to not want, and Steam boxes being largely based on Linux, to not want to take advantage of that doesn't make a whole lot of sense to me. So maybe they'll change their mind, but either way, Star Citizen looks huge. Everything that they've shown so far, as far as like the development of the universe, I mean, it has a literal encyclopedia of backstory to it, which I love that in a game. So check out Star Citizen. If you like a good, big, sprawling story, and massive, space battles, kind of like EVE Online, though this will probably even go beyond that. Check it out. It looks like it's going to be a beauty of a game, and you can still get involved in its development. So Star Citizen, go for it. I'll be back with more. Do you have a business or product that you are interested in getting advertised to a largely U.S.-based audience on an award-winning podcast and radio show airing on hundreds of radio stations? Let Free Talk Live be a part of your advertising portfolio, because the world of audio never fades. Contact me, Brian Sovryn, and I can get an advertising package that will work within your budget. Email me at brian@freetalklive.com, and that's Brian with an I. Again, brian@freetalklive.com.
What are you doing? I can't believe I caught you again. Jesus doesn't approve of this little habit of yours.
I know, baby, I know it's wrong, but it feels so right.
Well, it ain't.
But I've been doing it since I was 12 years old.
It's nothing but a sinful perversion of nature, if you ask me.
But baby, I don't ever want to stop looking at tech websites, new gadgets, video games, software, or any of that stuff.
Well, then I'm leaving.
Okay. Bye.
Pick of the week.
It is time for Pick of the Week, where I geek out. I can talk about anything. It could be a topic, it could be a movie, it could be a TV show, comic book, a book, product. You name it. Don't worry. This week I'm not going to talk about my dick. Come on. Anyway, this week I teased last week what this week would be about for Pick of the Week, and I will live up to that promise. And that is Star Wars: The Clone Wars, the TV show. So, and it's important to differentiate here, because what I'm actually specifically going to talk about, I'll talk about the Clone Wars a little bit in general, but I'm specifically talking about just this month in March of 2014, Disney, which owns Lucasfilm now, which owns Star Wars, Disney released a season 6 of the Clone Wars on Netflix, and Netflix exclusively. Blu-rays will probably come out at some point. So, but I want to talk about that because it was a really big deal. A lot of people jumped on it. A lot of people watched it. It was a huge success for Netflix, just like seemingly everything that goes on with Netflix seems to be a pretty huge success, which is probably why with a lot of this net neutrality stuff, they're trying to take down Netflix from being such a powerhouse that it is. But anyway, the Star Wars: The Clone Wars is it's a CGI animated cartoon. It went on for 6 seasons, 6 years, and it actually had a theatrical film release. It really isn't the first episode. It actually takes place like kind of in between in the first season, but there was a movie that was released in theaters in like 2007, 2008 for it. And it's a show that's kind of gotten a mixed reception overall. Because, it takes place between, of course, it's during the Old Republic. It takes place between episode 2 and episode 3. So, Anakin's pretty well grown up. And in fact, a lot of it is his trials with, his own Padawan, that being Ahsoka Tano, which is a young female character that ages as the show goes on, and ends up becoming pretty much a woman, by the end of the show. And I love it. I love the Clone Wars. Now, of course, I've talked about Star Wars often enough during Pick of the Week, especially to where, pretty much anything Star Wars that comes out, I generally consume because I grew up. I was born in 1981. And so I grew up, consciously, being a teenager and all that during a time when there was no Star Wars. And yet there was this trilogy and, that existed that were just the most mind blowing movies that you could ever watch. That being the original Star Wars trilogy. So as soon as anything Star Wars came out, I mean, you gobbled it up because it's like, oh, God, thank you. More Star Wars, please just give it to me. And, the Clone Wars, for Star Wars to come to television, I mean, this was a big deal. And, or even, a lot of people jumped on. The ratings were huge for Cartoon Network for a while. I don't think they ever tapered off. A lot of people complained about it being a kid's show. It was a show where, at least at first, where every episode kind of had to have a moral message to it. David Filoni was behind it. He does great work. And George Lucas was pretty well involved in the beginning of it, at least. So, I didn't expect a whole lot of people to be into it. And I'll tell you why, because when I went to go see, like I said, they did a feature film release first of the Clone Wars. And again, I want to be clear. This is the CGI one, not the animated, like 5-minute shorts that Cartoon Network did years and years ago called the Clone Wars. That's a totally different story. Everybody loves those. The CGI version of Clone Wars is where people have disagreement. Anyway, when the theatrical film came out for the Clone Wars show, there was nobody in the theater. There wasn't anybody really getting dressed up. It wasn't anywhere treated like episodes 1, 2, or 3 were treated when they came out, where you had lines around, you had people camping out, you had lines around the theater and all that. Just nobody seemed to really care. On one end, I felt comforted about that because I think that, a lot of people, especially when a Star Wars movie comes out, suddenly everybody pretends that they're a Star Wars fan when really they're not, because, I mean, I don't want to get into like the whole real fans argument. It's just like, if you love Star Wars, you generally watch Star Wars all the time, or you consume books or comics, or, maybe at least wear a t-shirt every once in a while about it. And so the posers that just want to connect and come out. And I hate that I'm even using the word posers. It's fine. Okay. I used to be a very bitter young man and I hated that I would get picked on for liking Star Wars. But then whenever a Star Wars movie would come out, everybody pretended they acted like they liked Star Wars. And it's like, well, what the fuck? Do you like it or don't you? But anyway, so sometimes I still deal with that. I was okay with the fact that nobody was there. I was like, oh, good. So I'm actually here getting to enjoy it without having to deal with a bunch of people, acting like they actually care about Star Wars coming out and not just wanting, some degree of human connection or neo-shamanism. And, so I didn't expect the show to be a huge hit, and it generally wasn't with adults. I know some adults, some good friends of mine now who did enjoy it all the way through, thankfully, but I know plenty of people that still rip on it. All the time, and then that it was, oh, it's a kid's show. It's this. And at first, that was kind of fair. It was sort of a kid's show. But the show grew up, along with its audience, which happens with many television shows, even cartoons. And this last season, the 6th season, was really I don't know what happened, because it was so adult, it didn't treat you like a kid at all. It didn't feel like it was geared towards kids at all. I mean, it was very dramatic subjects. And I mean, it was great. I loved it. This last season that they did, I thought was fantastic. I have a couple problems with it though, that I will discuss. And that is that they seem to have changed the ideas. All right, here's the thing is that I'm being told, and there's some degree of evidence for this, that the 6th season of the Clone Wars was already planned 3-4 years ago. And I don't know if I believe that, because I read articles 3-4 years ago in Star Wars Insider, which were cleared by George Lucas, that like Order 66, there's a conspiracy you find out about Order 66. And if I'm giving something away, I'm sorry. I can't believe you didn't already watch all these episodes. But you find out in season 6 of the Clone Wars that there are essentially chips in like organic processors, logic gates essentially in clones' heads that would activate Order 66 to where they would start killing Jedi that you see happen in episode 3 of Star Wars. Okay. There was an article in Star Wars Insider, again, had to be cleared by George Lucas, where it said that that was because a lot of people were wondering, how did suddenly, they get a message or initiate Order 66 and suddenly they just start killing the Jedi that they were taking orders from 2 seconds ago? How did that happen? And so a lot of people theorize that this is how it happened, is that they actually had like some kind of programming in their head that as soon as you said Order 66, they just snapped and started killing Jedi. But this article, again, cleared by George Lucas, okay, said no, they were just the perfect weapon, and they took orders so perfectly that when they got the order, initiate Order 66, they just did it. No programming, just quite frankly, they were designed to take orders and not question them. And so there's a big change there. Now that's not unheard of for Star Wars, for there to be huge changes, but my problem here is that I wonder about these stories being planned out that far in advance if there was such a drastic change that occurred. Okay. And the reason I say that is because, and the reason that I wonder about this is because season 6 of Star Wars literally rewrote how the Force works, or season 6 of the Clone Wars rewrote how the Force works. It kind of like knocked off the idea of midichlorians that was very controversial. A lot of people didn't like, because midichlorians essentially put an end to the spiritualness of the Force. And it said, no, it's just a scientific thing. There's this symbiotic relationship. And season 6 of the Clone Wars just kind of like crapped on that and actually inserted a lot of, Kabbalistic ideas like the Kabbalah, and inputted a whole lot of very, I mentioned a couple of books earlier, the Kybalion and the Emerald Tablet of Thoth. A lot of ideas from those books were suddenly inserted into the Star Wars universe again. And it's funny because now that it's owned by Disney, that suddenly this happens. And a lot of these ideas, were already in Star Wars, but they got kind of added in after the fact too. Like they originally, okay, let's go back to the original trilogy. Forget about Clone Wars right now. We go back to the original trilogy. You have, the episode 4, you have A New Hope, the first Star Wars movie came out in 1977. Okay. There's no mention of Yoda whatsoever. The character just clearly doesn't exist. Without question, in my opinion, the character just doesn't fucking exist. And there's a lot of evidence to that. And so then suddenly Empire Strikes Back, suddenly you have this character named Yoda. Now, here's an odd thing. Don't call conspiracy on me. I didn't come up with this. Here's what I want you to do. I want you to go to images.google.com and I want you to type in Yoda Freemasonry. And you're going to run into some paintings that are a good century old, if not older, of a creature that looks exactly like Yoda, and his name's Yoda. And so Yoda's actually literally a Freemasonic character. I'm not getting into conspiracy here, okay? It's just what it is. In Freemasonic lore, there's a character named Yoda, and it looks like Yoda. They're one and the same. And so, a lot of people get conspiratorial with Disney that they're, behind the Illuminati, blah, 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 blah. So anyway, it's just like myself being knowledgeable of these things, not believing them, but being knowledgeable of these things. It was pretty oddball that suddenly we get some real spiritualism back into Star Wars now that Disney owns it. So, but of course, if Dave Filoni wrote this stuff, 3-4 years ago, then that can't be, Disney couldn't have had any influence on it. So, but I don't know. The other thing that I think a lot of people were looking for with season 6 is that Ahsoka Tano is an awesome character. She's the Padawan and eventually knight, or not really a knight, but she was the Padawan for Anakin Skywalker. And she starts going down kind of the dark side, which I always think is great. I love it when characters go to the dark side. And that storyline, when people didn't know they were going to get a season 6, because we didn't know we were going to get a season 6 when Disney bought it out because they yanked it from Cartoon Network. That storyline didn't get finished, and it didn't really get finished in season 6 of the Clone Wars either. But I have heard that Ahsoka Tano will be in the new cartoon Star Wars Rebels, so hopefully we'll get some wrap up on that. Anyway, I enjoyed it. Check it out if you haven't. It's great Star Wars. It's great, action anyway. Again, if you want to donate to the show, all the information's in the show notes. Carpe Lucem. I will see you next week.
This has been Sovryn Tech. Visit us at sovryntech.com. That's SOVRYN tech.com. There you can connect with us, see more of what you've heard on today's show, and catch our podcast feed. Sovryn Tech is open source. We encourage you to share. Later, nerds.